All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Irrational Confidence Podcast. We're talking college football, and we're recapping the final game of the season. Yeah, maybe some of you didn't watch it all, or you were like most of us, you turned it off at halftime. But the man who joins me, the man who has gone over to the dark side, he is now the most hated man in all of podcasting. My co-host, Fresh. Fresh, how you doing, buddy?
Haps, I don't know if I'm the most hated man in all of podcasting, but probably pretty close. Uh, on cloud nine right now. When you win back-to-back titles, it's something that we didn't really even. It was tough enough winning the first one, much less winning two back to in a row. So it's a whole surreal situation. The first thing I sort of thought of was back in 2015. Steve-O, who little plug for him, he does our photo finish podcast for your Spittable Sports. We went to Sanford and we saw the Georgia Southern game. It was senior day. Mark Richt actually became Mark Richt's final home game as the head coach of the Georgia Bulldogs. And that team was in disarray, a mess, needed a miracle, needed the refs to help them to beat Georgia Southern. Sonny Michel had to do it by himself. And, 2 weeks later, he gets canned and then, Kirby takes over. And it seems like it's been longer than that, but from where we were there and where we are now is pretty impressive in the past 6, 7, 7 and change. It's an amazing place going from very very bottom to the very very top.
You were at Georgia was at the very bottom.
Well, I mean that team when you're barely surviving. They were 6 and 6 years and they were under Mark Richt at the same time, and quarterback play was rough. Teams they weren't getting up and barely surviving. Georgia Southern is a bad spot.
Okay, they might not have been in the healthy spot that they are now, but I wouldn't call that the bottom there. Like Michigan going 3-9 or whatever it was under one of the Rich Rod years, that's the bottom.
All right. Well, yeah, it's not putrid level like that, but it was pretty bad.
Yeah, or not like Florida State or Florida or anything else where you're completely into the rebuild program. Fresh, I listen. Congratulations to Georgia, and that's a great accomplishment going back to back. First team to do it in the college football playoff thing. My biggest takeaway was just at the end of the day, just that the national title wound up happening in the semifinals and not in the finals.
Well,
I
no
don't
doubt there.
I don't care what anybody says. TCU spent a month long game planning for Michigan, and they did everything that they needed to do to beat Michigan and planned accordingly to get all of those things lined up for them to win that football game. And then on top of that, you go into planning a week later, and especially transitioning from a completely different style of team from Michigan to Georgia is a very tall task, especially with the amount of talent that is on the field with the Georgia Bulldogs. That's where it didn't shock me from the blowout game. I know that in our text message for our group here for the show, I said that it was over in the first quarter, and you told me that there's a lot of football left to be played. I said it's not happening. The game's over because, and I think I sent you about 4 bus memes and a couple other turn off the channel type memes. I know you're not going to turn it off, but the thing is that a program like TCU, like we said in our wrap up, needed every single thing to go right perfectly. They need every ounce of the game to break their way, and it wasn't going to happen. They aren't a team that would be able to prepare for Georgia within 10 days. That just goes to show you the kind of talent that's on Georgia right now. That being said, welcome to being the villain, Fresh. And that's the thing that I am slightly concerned about Georgia fans because it's now a new place that you have to embrace being a villain. Now, hear me out before you start being nervous about this. I will say this: I will take being the villain. I will enjoy being the villain at times because no one hates teams that are bad. No one really hates the Kansas City Royals. Nobody hates the James Madison University. No one hates Northwestern. Okay? No one hates well, you might hate the Detroit Lions, but I don't think you really hate the Detroit Lions. Not like you hate the Chicago Bears. People only hate teams that win. And that's the first thing that you have to understand. But what comes with being the villain is that every single person that comes your way is now going to try to diminish your accomplishment. I've dealt with this for years here, Fresh, and it's something that, you talk about Alabama fans, Ohio State fans, Yankee fans, Dodger fans, Bulls fans at the time back in the day with Jordan. All of them come around with something here. You wind up hating the teams that win. You talk about the Golden State Warriors, talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers, all those things. Everyone wants to criticize your accomplishment and take it away from you. And there'll be things that people will constantly pick at and pick at and pick at. And that's what will get under a lot of fans' skin, because you're not used to people constantly picking at your accomplishments. Now, you might be used to people not giving your team the credit you deserve or anything along those lines. But what you're not used to when someone sits there and says, and again, I'm paraphrasing here because social media is a crazy place. You sit there and say, like, Georgia gets lucky for going through Ohio State there. You call Georgia a bunch of dirty players. I'm not saying this. This is what I'm reading on social media here. But that's what a lot of people wind up talking about. And I don't necessarily know if fans can handle that, because Georgia has been one of the teams for many, many years that's been kind of this scrappy underdog program that's produced great running back after great running back. They haven't been in the same breath as the Alabamas. They haven't been in the same breath as Clemson at the time. Well, and I will say they've been in the same breath as Clemson. I won't say that. But you're in a new stratosphere here. That's the first thing. You're in a new stratosphere. And this is the stratosphere that everyone else will take in a heartbeat. But the fans have got to be ready with what comes along with that. Because when you're at the top of the mountain, everyone's going to do everything they can to make your accomplishments seem less and less and less. And that's the hard thing for a lot of fans to get over, that you can't stand that people don't pat you on the back for every single accomplishment now. And now every
We'll
single
be
one.
just fine, Seth.
Okay, I'll tell you that I've seen a couple of your fans already start to get a little bit butthurt on this stuff, because people aren't like kowtowing down to you. But I'm telling you right now, it's a different world that they're not used to living in, and it's something that will change there. Yeah, you'll be just fine because you'll win. That's the whole great thing about this. It's a trade-off. You win, people hate on you. You don't win, people don't care about you. I'd rather have people have an opinion about my team. It's the same thing. I always laugh when people want to criticize the Big Ten or criticize Ohio State. I laugh at it because it's funny. It is. Because it means that we're enough that you have an opinion about us. If you weren't making fun of it, then you wouldn't care. Apathy is a dangerous thing.
It's a valid point.
So that's where I'd say this with it. It's an interesting thing. The other thing I will have to say this: Georgia and Alabama, from here on out, you need to cut all of the SEC chant stuff. All of that. Because now what you've turned it into is people coattail riding on your accomplishment. Understand that's the other big issue I have with this. I had this happen the other day as a South Carolina fan. Oh, did you watch the national title game? SEC. I'm like, you didn't win. Your team played in the Gator Bowl, not in the national title game. Don't your team live on your team's accomplishments. That's one of the hardest things for people to get their mind behind, that if my team is god awful and terrible, that I can sit there and point at another team and like, hey, look, they won. Yes, we know there's good football being played in the SEC. That's besides the point. But don't sit there and pat yourself on the back, sitting there going, hey, look, a team in our conference won the national title. Are you a fan of that team? Well, no, I root for South Carolina. I root for Florida. I root for Missouri. Your team didn't win. Yeah, but no, your team didn't win. Alabama, yes, they've won. LSU, yes, they've won. Georgia, they've won. And I'm only going off of college football playoff here, because with the playoff expanding, like, it's time to just sit there in the playoff era and just only focus on the eras in these things.
It's a valid point, man. Hey, rep your own school, do your own thing. If you win, you win. If you don't, you don't.
Yeah. But it'll be interesting to see how they recover and move on to next year with kind of what changing And I say recover with Stetson Bennett leaving. That'll be the interesting thing. But I know you got some 5 stars behind him.
He's the same age as Tom Brady, so 40-year-olds are it's impressive.
Yeah, better be graduate with a doctorate from Georgia.
Oh, he's gonna have a third. He's gonna have a law degree. Yeah, but it's you look at that game. Like that game was a complete dominant. There was no. It's actually embarrassing that Michigan even lost TCU in the first place. And they have no one to blame out of it not being there with themselves. But that game was putrid on a watchability for anyone who was not fully invested in the football game. But when you think about it, there was it was so bad there were actually some crazy anomalies statistically that ended up coming in the football game. Midway through the third quarter, there was as many points scored by Georgia as plays run in 45. Just think about that for a second. They covered the spread and they covered the over by themselves, 61.5. Georgia ran over 50 plays in TCU territory. TCU only ran 7 in Georgia territory. And really, on that busted play, that was four or five of them maybe at the end of that drive. Like, it was a complete dominant effort. TCU had 9 first downs. Georgia scored 9 touchdowns. There was no competitive effort whatsoever. And there's a Georgia TCU linebacker came out and said, "Well, it was nothing shocking." You completely got blown out of the entire stadium in the first 5 minutes. It didn't even make it to 5 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, and the game was already over. Yes, I know we were seeing our text messages like, "Oh yeah, we got game going on," and blah blah, because you just never know. But everyone who had eyes knew that ball game was over almost immediately. It was a complete dominant effort, largest victory in a bowl game ever. Largest victory in a bowl game ever, tied for the most points scored against an AP top 5 team all time. Like, those are things that are rare air that come into it. That's where the game got so out of control that these crazy stats and anomalies started coming into play. It was a beatdown. There's nothing really you can explain about how dominant that effort was in that team. You're gonna, who knows? Back to back is fantastic. You never get that third, but the accomplishment of where they are at now is pretty impressive. Kirby, the only other head coach to ever win multiple championships at his alma mater is Bear Bryant, and Kirby right there is the same. Like, that's another unique accomplishment that's in play. It's at my point surreal. It's fantastic. Yes, we are now there. We are on the level of the teams who have multiple titles. It's going to be interesting to see where they go from here, but it's been a heck of a run and another amazing season.
Yeah. Just don't say anything stupid this year about we're always going to be hunting and not the hunted. Like, you're a 2-time national championship winner. You're going to be hunted.
Hey, it got the team motivated, and they got them focused to go through and play. Whatever works. I mean, it's psychology. Whatever works and gets people motivated to play football.
That's the quote that motivates them. That one, right? That individual quote. That's the motivating one. I should remember that when I was coaching. We're not the hunted. We're not going to be hunting. I get to you, Fresh.
It works, man.
It works when it
maybe it's more for the fans to get the fans fired up, but it set the tone for somebody, and they were able to respond to
it. It must set the tone against when we're playing them. It felt like they're playing Mercer in this game, and that's really what it felt like. And we joked online. I wound up talking with a friend of the show, Coach McCord, and him and I were joking back and forth. And he finally sent a Austin Powers gift to me, and I asked him what channel Austin Powers was on because I was going to flip over to that. Wasn't on, unfortunately, but Liar, Liar, and Happy Gilmore were, and I kind of was bounced between which one of those I was going to watch. I think there's more like drama, and again, it's fake, but there's more drama of watching WWE Raw instead of this game. So I don't know. I wish that, as I said, I think I said this to you, Fresh. It's not the fact, it doesn't have any impact of Georgia winning, because Georgia could have been up by 10 the whole game and won the game wire to wire by 10 points. But that's an entertaining game. That's a 2-score game, possibility of it happening. That's got my interest. You're up 38-7 at halftime. Okay, great, wonderful. Congratulations on all your success. But time to now you've completely lost my interest. And I love college football like most people, and this was Oof, they need to
Did
do.
you watch? I mean, you didn't even. I know for a fact you didn't even watch when Ohio State had the 77 to whatever game over somebody. You turn that game off too. Like if it gets out of control, you turn the game off.
Yeah, I've turned off a couple Ohio State games. I've turned off quite a few games if it's just if there's no reason to watch it. Like again, why am I watching something that's already predetermined? Georgia fans are going to be happy. Yeah, it's great. We're watching our team blow them out, but I guarantee you, I'm curious. I really am curious what the ratings wind up coming in at.
Oh, they bombed. It was like 17 million people watch. It was terrible ratings. I mean, first of all, to even but you have to even factor the people turning the game on in the first place. That's where the ratings kick in. The TCU matchup, most people knew, as we've talked about, that they probably figured it was going to blow out. And the TCU fan base is a small enough fan base where that's not going to draw. Like if it was Michigan, the ratings would have been huge because all the Michigan fans would have turned in. People would have been looking for a Michigan Georgia matchup. If Ohio State and Michigan had played, those ratings would have been all the fan bases and everyone watching with the intrigue would have watched those games. I mean, TCU, like we said, they were Cinderella, but they weren't going to move the needle.
Yeah. So I'm pulling up right now here. So I'm pulling up actually the quarter by quarter breakdown there. It started out like it opened up from 8:30 was when they had the highest amount of viewers. It looks like they said 17.2 million was the highest viewers, which was down. It's down almost 25% there as well. And you take a look at the lower one here, it just gets worse and worse as that game goes on. So I don't think advertisers are pretty happy about that, but
Yeah, Dr. Pepper's not getting their money's worth.
hey, Fansville, man. All right, Fresh. One last thing before we go. College football announced their Hall of Fame. Let's go quickly through this here. Let's just jump to some of the big names here that people might remember. I take a look at Luke Kuechly from Boston College, linebacker. Jeremy Maclin from Missouri. Brian McKinney from Miami. Take a look. Mark Rick, head coach there. Mike Stonebreaker from Notre Dame. Tebow, Troy Vincent, Brian Westbrook, D'Angelo Williams, and Eric Berry, which I love that they include him. Reggie Bush, too. Dwight Freeney, Robert Gallery, LaMichael James, Derek Johnson, Paul Johnson. There you go, Fresh.
I mean, it's a unique list. I think it's a lot of players who, if you're even a younger fan or you're like our age, maybe like in the next, maybe 8 to 10 years younger, you know the guys because they were in college. You probably were able to watch them as a younger kid, but also saw them in the NFL for most of these guys. Like you had that connection. It's not like they're 30, 40 years out where you're trying to remember like who the heck is that person. I mean, Tim Tebow. I'm surprised it took this long to get him in the College Football Hall of Fame. Reggie Bush, hopefully he gets his Heisman Trophy officially returned to him, and he can. But getting in there, that's a huge step in the right direction for that because the way the college game is now. And kids, if you're young enough and you don't know who Reggie, like you only know him from the Wendy's commercials, you need to go look at YouTube and look at Reggie Bush or Tim Tebow. The two of them were game changing, game altering, uh, iconic players at their time. Uh, Freeney was a sack machine when Syracuse was legit, when Donovan McNabb was there and Marvin Harrison Sr. was the wide receiver. Um, and what he did for the Colts, he was doing that with Syracuse. Like he was getting after the quarterback and shutting people down. Kuechly is a tackling machine. There's a reason why he's a first round pick. The Michael James and Michael Bishop, those two are quiet, sneaky, good players. Michael Bishop dominated there at Kansas State. Was really a stalwart under getting Bill Snyder and that program really going and making progress on a grand scale. And Michael James was that, 5 foot nothing, 100 and nothing, shifty slot receiver, running back, kick returner, could do it all for Oregon and really dominate. And if you look up him on YouTube as well, him and Brian uh, Chip Kelly, him and Chip Kelly were kind of the real starter before DeAnthony Thomas really got going there. It was LaMichael James, but solid class all around. Paul Johnson, what he did with the triple option and winning where he was at, and Mark Richt getting announced the same day that Georgia won. I think it was a nice little connection there, and obviously, he never won the title, but building programs there and his time at Florida State as well was a pretty nice little addition at the very end.
Yeah, and I even remember D'Angelo Williams at Memphis, running back, just running all over creation. I would have to say, guys, I got to reiterate what Fresh is talking about. I Reggie Bush was a video game character. Reggie Bush was a video game character before, we really use that term. I think it's him and Michael Vick are the two biggest video game characters that we've ever had that were like real life players. And playing with Reggie Bush in NCAA football was just dominant. It was just phenomenal to play with him, and he just completely destroyed people with him. I really enjoyed this list here. It's really kind of neat to see some of these guys that, in the last 15 years are finally getting their just due into the College Football Hall of Fame. But I don't know. There's a couple that I'd still like to see on there, but maybe they've been on in previous years. But
did you have to pull yourself back when you saw Robert Gallery and you had to forget, like, I can't think of him as an Oakland Raider and being the number 2 overall pick and a complete bust, and had to think of him like at Iowa being a monster tackle? I had to pull myself back from that one.
So I always, who's the other one? That was it. It was him and is it Brian Balaga?
Balaga had some success, but yeah.
Was he at Iowa too, though?
He was at Iowa, yeah.
Yeah. So those are the two. I always flip Robert Gallery and him around with their career, but yeah, it was interesting to see Gallery make it in there. But yeah, he was dominant at Iowa. It's insane.
I mean, you love wrestling. Like, he looked like the Undertaker.
The
guy. It was almost a spitting image of the dude.
That's awesome. All right, folks. Well, that's going to wrap us up for college football season. You've been listening to another episode of the Irrational Confidence Podcast. Make sure you go to spinablesports.com. Yep, that is spinablesports.com. We have all sorts of sports news out there, so make sure you're following along with us. But this is not the end for us. Yeah, we're moving over to pro football here. We're going to talk NFL playoffs just before we switch over to college basketball. Yeah, we're coming back with you March Madness, and we're going to announce the second annual Irrational Confidence Hostile Takeover. So if you're interested, make sure you interact with us on Twitter. We're going to have more details for you coming up in the next few weeks here as we get closer to March Madness. Amazing time. Special thanks to our producer, Drew. Without him, none of this is possible. Like, subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. If you're watching this on the YouTube, hit that notification bell. Get notified every single time we release a new episode.
It's a great day to be alive. Looking forward to moving to the sports calendar along the way. With that said, go Dogs. Bye, y'all.